My dad saw me limping down the side of a scorching Atlanta highway with my 6-month-old baby in my arms. He pulled his SUV over to the shoulder, his eyes wide with shock, and asked where my car was. I looked at him with tears stinging my eyes and told him my mother-in-law took it. She said I should be grateful they even let me live in their house. My dad gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning ash gray. He went completely silent for 3 seconds before leaning over to pop the passenger door open. "Get in," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "This ends tonight." What happened next completely dismantled my husband's toxic family. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who tried to break you. The Georgia sun was absolutely brutal that afternoon. The heat radiating off the asphalt felt like an open oven door, and every step sent a sharp shooting pain up my leg. I am Nia. I am 32 years old, and I am a forensic accountant. I spend my days tracking down hidden assets, untangling complex financial webs, and holding corporate fraudsters accountable. Yet despite all my professional success, my sharp eye for detail, and my financial independence, I somehow allowed myself to become a victim in my own marriage. But on that blistering Tuesday afternoon, the successful accountant was nowhere to be found. I was just a desperate, exhausted mother trying to shield her baby from the blazing summer sun. It was mid-July, and the humidity was so thick it felt like trying to breathe underwater. My infant son, Malik, was strapped to my chest in his baby carrier. His small body was heavy and completely drenched in sweat. I had draped a light muslin blanket over his head to block out the harsh UV rays, but I could feel his tiny heart racing against my chest. Every step I took was pure agony. The heel of my designer pump had snapped a mile back, forcing me to hobble unevenly on the scorching concrete. My right foot was blistered and bleeding, leaving tiny crimson smudges on the pavement with every limping step I took. Cars whipped past us, blowing hot exhaust in our faces, but no one stopped to help. I kept my head down, focusing entirely on putting one foot in front of the other, repeating a silent prayer to just make it home. How did I get here? How did a woman who prides herself on logic and control end up walking down a dangerous suburban highway with bleeding feet? The answer is the same reason so many women find themselves trapped in toxic situations. I wanted to keep the peace. I loved my husband Marcus. When we first met, he was charming, attentive, and made me feel like the center of his universe. But over the years, I realized that the true center of Marcus's universe was his mother, Beatrice. Beatrice is a 62-year-old woman obsessed with high society appearances, maintaining a fake image of wealth, and controlling every aspect of her children's lives. I had spent years shrinking myself, hiding my success, and biting my tongue just to avoid her vicious comments and Marcus's spineless defense of her. I thought if I just compromised a little more, if I just showed them a little more grace, they would eventually accept me as family. But walking on that highway, feeling the raw blisters on my heels, and hearing my baby whimper from the heat, I finally realized a terrifying truth. There is no compromising with people who want to see you broken. They do not want peace. They want submission. And Beatrice had just pushed me to my absolute breaking point. I had been walking for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 45 minutes. My arms were trembling from supporting Malik's weight, and my throat was parched dry. Every time a semi-truck sped past, the massive gust of wind threatened to knock me entirely off balance. I remember looking down at my son. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow from the oppressive heat. A wave of profound guilt washed over me. I was a mother now. My primary job was to protect my child, and because of my endless patience with my toxic mother-in-law, I had put my son in danger. The physical pain in my foot was absolutely nothing compared to the agony of knowing I had allowed myself to be treated like garbage. I promised myself right then and there, with the sun beating down on my back, that things were going to change. I just needed to survive this walk. I just needed to get my baby into a cool, safe place. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting back a wave of dizzying nausea. Suddenly, the loud screech of tires against gravel jolted me out of my thoughts. A massive black SUV swerved onto the shoulder of the highway, throwing up a cloud of dust just a few feet ahead of me. For a second, my heart hammered in my chest with sheer panic. I tightened my grip around Malik, preparing to run into the grass if I had to. But then I recognized the sleek tinted windows and the familiar license plate. The passenger side window rolled down smoothly, and I saw the face of the one man in the world who had always been my absolute protector, my father Winston. My dad is 58 years old and a retired commercial real estate lawyer. He is a tall, broad-shouldered man who carries an aura of absolute authority wherever he goes. He is not a man who yells or throws tantrums. He is a man who calculates, strategizes, and executes. Growing up, he taught me everything I know about analyzing contracts, spotting liars, and standing my ground. But looking at me right now, limping and bleeding on the side of the road, his usual calm demeanor was fracturing. His dark eyes darted from my messy hair to my flushed baby, and finally down to my bare, bleeding foot. The muscles in his jaw ticked. He shifted the car into park and just stared at me for a moment, processing the horrifying scene. "Nia, what in the world are you doing walking on this highway?" he asked. His deep voice was thick, with a controlled, simmering anger that I had rarely heard before. "Where is your car?" I stood there paralyzed. The sheer relief of seeing him clashed with the deep burning shame of having to admit what had just happened to me. I had always tried to shield my dad from the absolute worst of Beatrice's behavior. I knew that if Winston ever found out how my husband and his family truly treated me, he would unleash a fury they were completely unprepared for. So I had kept quiet. I had smiled at family dinners. I had pretended everything was fine. But I could not pretend anymore. Not with my heel bleeding onto the hot pavement and my baby crying from heat exhaustion. Tears that I had been holding back for the last hour finally spilled over my eyelashes. They tracked through the dust and sweat on my cheeks, stinging my skin. I hobbled closer to the open window, feeling the blast of icy air conditioning from inside the vehicle. "Beatrice took it," I whispered. My voice cracked and I had to clear my throat to speak louder. "My mother-in-law took my car, Dad." My dad frowned, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. He leaned closer to the window. "She took your car." "How?" "You bought that Tesla with your own money before you even had the baby. Why would she take your car?" A fresh sob ripped through my chest. I hugged Malik closer, trying to soothe him, while my own body shook with tears. "She took the keys right out of my hand," I cried. "She told me I needed to learn some respect. She said I was an ungrateful outsider and that I should be thanking God on my knees that they even let me live in their house. She told me to walk home so I could learn my place." I watched my father's face change. It was a subtle shift, but to someone who knew him well, it was terrifying. The confusion melted away, leaving behind a cold, hardened resolve. The color drained from his knuckles as he gripped the steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked under his hands. He did not ask where Marcus was. He did not ask what I did to provoke her. He did not offer empty platitudes about family misunderstandings. My dad is a man of the law, and he knew a severe violation of respect when he saw one. He knew his daughter, the woman he raised to be brilliant and fiercely independent, had been reduced to walking on a dangerous highway because of a cruel, insecure woman. He went completely silent. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The silence inside that SUV was louder than the roaring traffic on the highway. It was the sound of a storm gathering strength. It was the sound of a father realizing his daughter's peace was an illusion and deciding to step in and fix it permanently. Without saying another word, he leaned across the center console and pushed the heavy passenger door open. The blast of cold air hit my legs, offering instant relief from the suffocating heat. "Get in," he said. His voice was dangerously calm, quiet, and precise. It was the exact tone he used in a courtroom, right before he dismantled an opposing counsel's entire case. "This ends tonight." I did not hesitate. I climbed into the blessed air conditioning of his car, settling Malik into the spare car seat Dad always kept in the back for emergencies. I collapsed into the leather passenger seat, pulling off my ruined shoe and letting out a shaky breath. I did not know exactly what my father was planning to do, but as the heavy door clicked shut, sealing us inside, I knew one thing for absolute certain. The era of me being the quiet, accommodating daughter-in-law was officially over. Beatrice had wanted to teach me a lesson about my place in her family, but she had no idea she had just invited a hurricane to her front door. My dad saw me limping down the side of a scorching Atlanta highway with my 6-month-old baby in my arms. He pulled his SUV over to the shoulder, his eyes wide with shock, and asked where my car was. I looked at him with tears stinging my eyes and told him my mother-in-law took it. She said I should be grateful they even let me live in their house. My dad gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning ash gray. He went completely silent for 3 seconds before leaning over to pop the passenger door open. "Get in," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "This ends tonight." What happened next completely dismantled my husband's toxic family. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who tried to break you. The Georgia sun was absolutely brutal that afternoon. The heat radiating off the asphalt felt like an open oven door, and every step sent a sharp shooting pain up my leg. I am Nia. I am 32 years old, and I am a forensic accountant. I spend my days tracking down hidden assets, untangling complex financial webs, and holding corporate fraudsters accountable. Yet despite all my professional success, my sharp eye for detail, and my financial independence, I somehow allowed myself to become a victim in my own marriage. But on that blistering Tuesday afternoon, the successful accountant was nowhere to be found. I was just a desperate, exhausted mother trying to shield her baby from the blazing summer sun. It was mid-July, and the humidity was so thick, it felt like trying to breathe underwater. My infant son, Malik, was strapped to my chest in his baby carrier. His small body was heavy and completely drenched in sweat. I had draped a light muslin blanket over his head to block out the harsh UV rays, but I could feel his tiny heart racing against my chest. Every step I took was pure agony. The heel of my designer pump had snapped a mile back, forcing me to hobble unevenly on the scorching concrete. My right foot was blistered and bleeding, leaving tiny crimson smudges on the pavement with every limping step I took. Cars whipped past us, blowing hot exhaust in our faces, but no one stopped to help. I kept my head down, focusing entirely on putting one foot in front of the other, repeating a silent prayer to just make it home. How did I get here? How did a woman who prides herself on logic and control end up walking down a dangerous suburban highway with bleeding feet? The answer is the same reason so many women find themselves trapped in toxic situations. I wanted to keep the peace. I loved my husband, Marcus. When we first met, he was charming, attentive, and made me feel like the center of his universe. But over the years, I realized that the true center of Marcus's universe was his mother, Beatrice. Beatrice is a 62-year-old woman obsessed with high society appearances, maintaining a fake image of wealth and controlling every aspect of her children's lives. I had spent years shrinking myself, hiding my success, and biting my tongue just to avoid her vicious comments and Marcus's spineless defense of her. I thought if I just compromised a little more, if I just showed them a little more grace, they would eventually accept me as family. But walking on that highway, feeling the raw blisters on my heels, and hearing my baby whimper from the heat, I finally realized a terrifying truth. There is no compromising with people who want to see you broken. They do not want peace. They want submission. And Beatrice had just pushed me to my absolute breaking point. I had been walking for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 45 minutes. My arms were trembling from supporting Malik's weight, and my throat was parched dry. Every time a semi-truck sped past, the massive gust of wind threatened to knock me entirely off balance. I remember looking down at my son. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow from the oppressive heat. A wave of profound guilt washed over me. I was a mother now. My primary job was to protect my child, and because of my endless patience with my toxic mother-in-law, I had put my son in danger. The physical pain in my foot was absolutely nothing compared to the agony of knowing I had allowed myself to be treated like garbage. I promised myself right then and there, with the sun beating down on my back, that things were going to change. I just needed to survive this walk. I just needed to get my baby into a cool, safe place. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting back a wave of dizzying nausea. Suddenly, the loud screech of tires against gravel jolted me out of my thoughts. A massive black SUV swerved onto the shoulder of the highway, throwing up a cloud of dust just a few feet ahead of me. For a second, my heart hammered in my chest with sheer panic. I tightened my grip around Malik, preparing to run into the grass if I had to. But then I recognized the sleek tinted windows and the familiar license plate. The passenger side window rolled down smoothly, and I saw the face of the one man in the world who had always been my absolute protector, my father Winston. My dad is 58 years old and a retired commercial real estate lawyer. He is a tall, broad-shouldered man who carries an aura of absolute authority wherever he goes. He is not a man who yells or throws tantrums. He is a man who calculates, strategizes, and executes. Growing up, he taught me everything I know about analyzing contracts, spotting liars, and standing my ground. But looking at me right now, limping and bleeding on the side of the road, his usual calm demeanor was fracturing. His dark eyes darted from my messy hair to my flushed baby, and finally down to my bare, bleeding foot. The muscles in his jaw ticked. He shifted the car into park and just stared at me for a moment, processing the horrifying scene. "Nia, what in the world are you doing walking on this highway?" he asked. His deep voice was thick with a controlled, simmering anger that I had rarely heard before. "Where is your car?" I stood there paralyzed. The sheer relief of seeing him clashed with the deep, burning shame of having to admit what had just happened to me. I had always tried to shield my dad from the absolute worst of Beatrice's behavior. I knew that if Winston ever found out how my husband and his family truly treated me, he would unleash a fury they were completely unprepared for. So I had kept quiet. I had smiled at family dinners. I had pretended everything was fine. But I could not pretend anymore. Not with my heel bleeding onto the hot pavement and my baby crying from heat exhaustion. Tears that I had been holding back for the last hour finally spilled over my eyelashes. They tracked through the dust and sweat on my cheeks, stinging my skin. I hobbled closer to the open window, feeling the blast of icy air conditioning from inside the vehicle. "Beatrice took it," I whispered. My voice cracked, and I had to clear my throat to speak louder. "My mother-in-law took my car, Dad." My dad frowned, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. He leaned closer to the window. "She took your car." "How? You bought that Tesla with your own money before you even had the baby. Why would she take your car?" A fresh sob ripped through my chest. I hugged Malik closer, trying to soothe him, while my own body shook with tears. "She took the keys right out of my hand," I cried. "She told me I needed to learn some respect. She said I was an ungrateful outsider, and that I should be thanking God on my knees that they even let me live in their house. She told me to walk home so I could learn my place." I watched my father's face change. It was a subtle shift, but to someone who knew him well, it was terrifying. The confusion melted away, leaving behind a cold, hardened resolve. The color drained from his knuckles as he gripped the steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked under his hands. He did not ask where Marcus was. He did not ask what I did to provoke her. He did not offer empty platitudes about family misunderstandings. My dad is a man of the law, and he knew a severe violation of respect when he saw one. He knew his daughter, the woman he raised to be brilliant and fiercely independent, had been reduced to walking on a dangerous highway because of a cruel, insecure woman. He went completely silent. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The silence inside that SUV was louder than the roaring traffic on the highway. It was the sound of a storm gathering strength. It was the sound of a father realizing his daughter's peace was an illusion and deciding to step in and fix it permanently. Without saying another word, he leaned across the center console and pushed the heavy passenger door open. The blast of cold air hit my legs, offering instant relief from the suffocating heat. "Get in," he said. His voice was dangerously calm, quiet, and precise. It was the exact tone he used in a courtroom, right before he dismantled an opposing counsel's entire case. "This ends tonight." I did not hesitate. I climbed into the blessed air conditioning of his car, settling Malik into the spare car seat Dad always kept in the back for emergencies. I collapsed into the leather passenger seat, pulling off my ruined shoe and letting out a shaky breath. I did not know exactly what my father was planning to do, but as the heavy door clicked shut, sealing us inside, I knew one thing for absolute certain. The era of me being the quiet, accommodating daughter-in-law was officially over. Beatrice had wanted to teach me a lesson about my place in her family, but she had no idea she had just invited a hurricane to her front door. The heavy thud of the SUV door closing cut off the roar of highway traffic instantly. I sank into the premium leather seat, letting the freezing air conditioning wash over my blistering skin. I looked down at my own hands. They were trembling violently, tightly clutching the edge of Malik's carrier. The adrenaline that had kept me walking was crashing hard, leaving behind a raw, aching exhaustion. But as I took a deep breath and lifted my head, I caught my father's gaze in the rearview mirror. His eyes were completely steady, anchored and fearless. Looking at him, the trembling in my hands stopped. A profound shift happened in my chest. The terrified, abandoned wife faded away, replaced by a woman who was finally ready to fight back. Dad kept his eyes on the road, merging seamlessly back into the late afternoon traffic. He did not press me for details immediately. He let the quiet of the car do the work. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at the cracked screen. The notifications were a glaring reminder of the disrespect I had just endured. "It happened right outside the pediatrician's clinic," I said, my voice dropping to a steady, clinical tone. I had just finished Malik's appointment. Beatrice and Chloe were waiting by my car. They ambushed me. Chloe wants to open a luxury nail salon in Midtown, and apparently she needs a $100,000 business loan because she has no credit history, and neither does Jamal. Beatrice decided that I was going to co-sign the loan. My father let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "They ambushed a mother carrying a sick infant to demand a six-figure financial guarantee." "Yes," I said, gripping my phone tighter. Beatrice brought the paperwork right to the parking lot. She had a pen ready. When I told her absolutely not, she lost her mind. She started screaming about how I was ruining Chloe's dreams. Chloe stood there playing the victim, whining about how she brings diversity to the family and deserves our support. Then Beatrice grabbed the keys straight out of my diaper bag. She said since Marcus is on the registration, the car belongs to the family, and since I am not acting like family, I do not get the privilege of driving it. They left me standing on the asphalt. My dad signaled and switched lanes, his face a mask of absolute lethal focus. "And your husband?" he asked. "What did Marcus have to say about his mother stealing a vehicle you paid for?" I unlocked my phone and opened my messages. I read the text Marcus had sent me just 20 minutes ago. I read it out loud so my father could hear exactly what kind of man I had married. Marcus wrote, quote, "I cannot believe you disrespected my mother and Chloe like that. You know how much this salon means to them. Just walk home and cool off. Think about how your stubbornness is tearing this family apart. Do not expect me to come get you." End quote. I locked the screen and tossed the phone onto the center console. "That is what he said, Dad. He told me to walk home in 90-degree heat with his son strapped to my chest because I would not finance his sister-in-law's vanity project." Winston did not yell. He did not pound his fist against the dashboard. Instead, an eerie, unnatural calm settled over him. He reached for the touchscreen display on his dashboard. "Buckle up, Nia," he said. He tapped the screen and connected his phone. "We have some arrangements to make before we arrive." The first call was to his personal contact at our primary banking institution. The speakerphone dialed twice before a crisp voice answered. My dad did not bother with pleasantries. He identified himself and immediately requested the fraud department. Within seconds, he was speaking to a senior manager. "I need you to flag the Tesla Model X registered under Nia's account as stolen," my dad instructed. "Furthermore, I need you to freeze all joint accounts tied to Marcus immediately." Flag any outgoing transfers over $500 as suspicious activity. My daughter is executing a full financial lockdown effective this exact minute. I watched in awe as my father dismantled my husband's financial access with a single phone call. Marcus had been using our joint account to funnel money to his mother and Jamal for years. I had the forensic accounting trails to prove it. I had been building the file for months, waiting for the right time to confront him. My dad just accelerated the timeline. The second call went straight to the local police precinct. My father asked for Sergeant Miller, a man he had worked with extensively during his years practicing real estate law. Miller answered warmly, but my dad cut straight to business. "I need a favor, and I need it done strictly by the book," my dad said. My daughter's vehicle was just stolen from a medical clinic parking lot. The perpetrators are her mother-in-law and sister-in-law. They are currently driving the vehicle to Beatrice's residence. I am texting you the license plate and the address now. I need a patrol unit dispatched to that location. Do not approach the house yet. Just have them park at the end of the street and wait for my signal. We are going to have a very polite, very legal conversation about Grand Theft Auto. The sergeant did not hesitate. He confirmed the details and promised a unit would be on standby within 10 minutes. The final call my dad made was the one that truly made my heart race. He dialed a commercial moving and logistics company that he frequently used for estate evictions. When the dispatcher answered, my dad's tone was all business. "I need an emergency extraction crew," he ordered. "Send your largest truck and a crew of 4 to the address I am sending you. Double time pay. They need to be ready to clear out a property tonight." I stared at him, my eyes wide. "Dad, a moving crew? What exactly are we doing?" My father finally glanced at me. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and filled with a fierce, protective pride. He turned the steering wheel, taking the exit that led straight toward the affluent, gated community where Beatrice lived. "You are a forensic accountant, Nia," he said, his voice steady. "You have spent the last 3 years tracking every dime Marcus stole from your accounts to fund his mother's fake high society lifestyle. You think I do not know about the LLC you set up? You think I do not know who actually bought the mortgage on Beatrice's house when Marcus bankrupted himself trying to save it last year?" My breath caught in my throat. I had kept that a closely guarded secret. When Marcus's terrible investments nearly cost Beatrice her home, I had quietly purchased the debt through a shell company. I was legally the owner of the sprawling mansion Beatrice paraded around in. My dad offered a tight, grim smile. "You have been holding all the cards, playing the dutiful wife, hoping they would eventually treat you with basic human decency. But they mistook your grace for weakness. Today, they put my grandson in danger. Today, they made you bleed. So today, we are not just taking your car back, we are taking everything back. They want to act like they own the world. We are going to show them exactly who holds the deed." The SUV sped through the manicured streets of the upscale neighborhood. The sprawling lawns and massive oak trees blurred past the window. My foot still throbbed and my clothes were still damp with sweat, but I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like a judge about to deliver a verdict. I looked down at Malik, who was finally sleeping peacefully in the cool air of the car. I gently touched his soft cheek, making a silent promise to him. He would never grow up watching his mother be treated like a second-class citizen in her own family. We turned onto Beatrice's street. Up ahead, parked perfectly in the circular driveway of the massive brick mansion, was my white Tesla. Chloe was standing next to it, snapping selfies with her phone, while Beatrice directed a catering crew carrying trays of food into the house. They were throwing a party. They had stolen my car, left me stranded, and immediately went home to host a high-society church gathering using my husband's money. My dad pulled the SUV up to the curb, blocking the driveway entirely. He put the car in park and unbuckled his seatbelt. He turned to me one last time before opening the door. "Keep your head high," he said. "Let them do the screaming. We are going to do the destroying." My dad killed the engine, but kept the air conditioning running. He reached into the back seat, gently unbuckling Malik and cradling his sleeping grandson against his broad chest. His tailored suit jacket provided a soft cushion for the baby. He gave me a single decisive nod. I pushed the heavy car door open and stepped out onto the pristine cobblestone driveway. The heat immediately wrapped around me again, but this time I did not feel weak. I felt entirely focused. I walked barefoot across the driveway, the hot stone pressing against my blistered soles. Chloe was standing by the front bumper of my car. She was so busy posing for her front-facing camera trying to get the perfect angle with my white Tesla in the background that she did not even notice us until my shadow fell over her screen. She spun around her phone, nearly slipping from her manicured fingers. The smug smile vanished from her face, instantly replaced by wide-eyed panic. She looked at my disheveled hair, my ruined clothes, and then her eyes shifted to my father. Winston is an intimidating man on a good day, but right now, holding my son with a look of absolute cold fury, he looked terrifying. Chloe opened her mouth to speak, but my dad just walked right past her, not even acknowledging her existence. I followed him up the grand marble steps of the mansion. The massive double mahogany doors were propped wide open to let the caterers flow in and out. The sounds of clinking crystal, polite laughter, and soft jazz drifted out into the sweltering afternoon air. I stepped over the threshold, and the sheer contrast hit me like a physical wall. The air conditioning inside was set so high it actually gave me goosebumps. Beatrice had transformed the grand foyer and the adjoining formal living room into a scene straight out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. This was her highly anticipated annual afternoon tea party for the elite women of the Atlanta Church Council. There were at least 30 women scattered across the sprawling room, wearing pastel silk dresses, oversized custom hats, and pristine white gloves. Caterers in crisp black uniforms moved gracefully through the crowd, balancing silver trays piled high with artisan pastries, gourmet cucumber sandwiches, and towering glasses of chilled, expensive champagne. The floral arrangements alone, massive centerpieces of imported white orchids and cascading roses, must have cost thousands of dollars. I stood at the edge of the sunken living room, taking it all in. I felt like the camera of my life was slowly panning around the room, capturing every detail of this grotesque display. I was barefoot, sweating, and bleeding. My designer skirt was wrinkled and stained with thick dust from the highway. Beside me, my father stood tall and immaculate, his presence commanding the space as he rocked my sleeping baby. The visual difference between my current state and the hyper-curated fake perfection of Beatrice's world was staggering. For years, I had quietly funded this exact lifestyle for her. I had paid the credit card bills that kept the lights on and the champagne flowing. I had literally bought the roof over their heads when they were facing financial ruin. Yet I was the one who had just been forced to walk the highway like a stray dog while they toasted to their own fake success. My eyes scanned the room and locked onto Beatrice. She was holding court near the grand marble fireplace, wearing a custom-tailored ivory suit that I recognized immediately because I had paid the department store statement for it just last month. She was laughing loudly, tossing her head back and gesturing wildly with a crystal champagne flute. She was entirely in her element, playing the role of the benevolent, wealthy matriarch for an audience of women she desperately wanted to impress. Then my gaze shifted to Chloe, who had hurried inside right behind us. She rushed over to Beatrice's side, trying to whisper in her ear, but Beatrice waved her off too, absorbed in her own bragging to notice the sheer panic written all over her daughter-in-law's face. As Chloe turned toward the light to grab Beatrice's arm, I saw it. The bright light from the crystal chandelier caught the unmistakable sparkle of a heavy diamond pendant resting against Chloe's collarbone. My breath hitched in my throat. It was not just any necklace. It was a custom diamond piece my father had given me on my wedding day. It was a priceless family heirloom that I kept securely locked in my bedroom, safe upstairs. Beatrice had not just stolen my car. While I was at the doctor's office fighting for my baby, she had clearly gone back to the house, rummaged through my private sanctuary, pried open my personal safe, and gifted my family diamonds to Chloe. She did it so the white woman she adored could parade around and impress the church ladies with our family's supposed generational wealth. The sheer audacity of it was paralyzing. Chloe was wearing my sacred jewelry, standing in my house drinking champagne paid for by my money while I was bleeding on the floor. Beatrice was busy telling a circle of fascinated women about her upcoming philanthropic endeavors, completely oblivious to the fact that her entire reality was about to come crashing down around her. Beatrice raised her glass to make a toast, her voice carrying perfectly over the soft jazz music. Ladies, I just want to say how incredibly blessed we are this year. The Lord has truly favored this family. My son Marcus is expanding his business portfolio, and we are looking at acquiring a beautiful new vacation property by the end of the year. God rewards those who walk in faith and carry themselves with grace. The church ladies murmured in agreement, taking polite sips of their champagne. Chloe finally managed to grab Beatrice's sleeve and pointed frantically toward the foyer where my father and I were standing. Beatrice turned her head, visibly annoyed by the interruption, but the polite society smile froze instantly on her face. Her champagne flute stopped midway to her lips. The jazz music seemed to fade away into nothing. One by one, the women in the room followed Beatrice's gaze, until 30 pairs of highly judgmental eyes were staring directly at me. The silence that swept through the grand living room was absolute and suffocating. You could hear a pin drop on the marble floor. The church ladies looked me up and down, taking in my bare, dirty feet, my sweat-soaked clothes, and the sheer exhaustion written all over my face. Then they looked at my father standing beside me, with a chilling, stoic expression, holding my baby like a shield against their judgment. I did not shrink under their stares. I did not cross my arms to hide my dirty clothes or look down at my bleeding feet. I stood up perfectly straight. I let my eyes sweep across the room, making direct eye contact with the women who had spent years looking down their noses at me, simply because I refused to play their shallow, high society games. Then I looked back at Beatrice. Her expensive ivory suit suddenly looked a little less perfect. The color had completely drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking pale and suddenly very old. For a decade, I had walked on eggshells to avoid this exact kind of public scene. I had prioritized their comfort over my own dignity, time and time again. I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace for Marcus. But standing there in the foyer of a house I secretly owned, watching another woman wear my stolen diamonds, I realized that silence had never protected me. It had only emboldened them. They took my kindness as an invitation to destroy me. The time for keeping the peace was officially over. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I prepared to walk right into the center of the room. It was time to go to war. I took my first step into the sunken living room. The soft slap of my bare feet against the imported Italian marble echoed through the sudden, deafening silence. With every step, I left a faint smudge of blood and highway dirt, but I kept my posture completely straight. I did not look at the ground. I kept my eyes locked entirely on Beatrice. The wealthy church ladies parted in front of me, pulling their expensive pastel dresses away, as if my exhaustion was contagious. The air in the room felt thick and suffocating, pressing down on us like a physical weight. You could feel the tension vibrating in the space between us, making the atmosphere incredibly tight and explosive. It felt like walking through a minefield, but I was no longer afraid of the blast. Beatrice finally found her voice. Her initial shock morphed instantly into sheer vicious outrage. "What on earth is wrong with you?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with forced indignation. She stepped forward, waving her manicured hand at my ruined clothes. "You look like an absolute beggar. How dare you barge into my home looking like trash and disrupt my private event? Look at yourself, Nia. You are a disgrace to this family. You are humiliating us in front of my guests. You need to turn around and walk right back out that door before I have you thrown out." Her shrill voice seemed to break the spell over the room. Chloe immediately sensed an opportunity to score points with her mother-in-law. She stepped out from behind Beatrice, crossing her arms over her chest. The diamonds around her neck caught the light, mocking me. Those were not just any diamonds. They were the last gift my mother gave me before she passed away. They were sacred to me, and seeing them draped over the collarbone of an entitled woman who had just left me to bake on a highway filled me with a rage so hot it burned away any remaining hesitation. "Seriously, Nia." Chloe sneered, her voice dripping with extreme condescension. "You are tracking blood and highway dirt all over Beatrice's imported Persian rug. Do you have any idea how much this carpet costs? If you insist on throwing a tantrum, you could have at least used the back door like a normal person. You are ruining the aesthetic of the entire afternoon. Look at you. You are completely unhinged. A year ago, or even a week ago, those words would have crushed me. I would have felt the burning sting of tears. I would have apologized, tried to explain myself, and retreated into the shadows to avoid making a scene. I would have swallowed my pride just to keep Marcus happy. But the woman who used to apologize for her own existence died on the side of that scorching highway. I did not shed a single tear. I did not let my voice tremble. My vision was crystal clear, and my heart was beating with a slow, steady rhythm. I did not stop walking. I moved straight past the grand piano, ignoring the horrified gasps of the church council members, and walked directly up to the catering table, where a pyramid of crystal champagne flutes had been perfectly arranged. Chloe was still talking, running her mouth about how I needed psychiatric help and how I was acting completely crazy. I did not say a single word to her. I calmly reached out and picked up the closest glass of vintage champagne. The crystal felt cool and heavy in my hand. I turned to face Chloe, stepping directly into her personal space. She stopped talking, taking a sudden step back as she finally registered the dead look in my eyes. But she was not fast enough. Without a single ounce of hesitation, I raised the glass and hurled the golden liquid directly onto the bodice of her pristine white silk dress. The liquid splashed violently across her chest, soaking the expensive fabric and running down the front of her skirt in a dark, sticky mess. The entire room erupted into collective gasps. Several church ladies actually clutched their pearls, stepping backward in sheer terror. Chloe let out a high-pitched, ear-piercing scream, looking down at her ruined outfit in absolute horror. "Are you crazy?" she shrieked, flapping her hands wildly, trying to wipe the moisture away. "This is a custom dress. You psycho!" I stepped even closer, closing the gap between us, until I was mere inches from her face. I kept my voice low, but it carried a lethal sharp edge that cut right through the panicked noise of the room. "Hand over the keys to my car," I commanded. "And then you are going to reach back, unclasp that chain, and take my mother's diamond necklace off your throat right this second." Beatrice lunged forward, inserting herself between us. Her face was flushed dark red with absolute fury. Her carefully curated high society mask had completely melted away, revealing the ugly, bitter reality underneath. "Have you lost your mind?" she screamed, pointing a shaking manicured finger directly at my face. "You do not come into my house and assault my family. You are nothing but an ungrateful, bitter woman. Chloe is wearing that necklace because I gave it to her. It belongs to this family and she actually knows how to represent the family name properly. You are going to pay for that dress, and then I am calling the police to have you arrested for trespassing." I did not flinch at her threats. I stood my ground, refusing to break eye contact with Beatrice. "Call them," I said, my voice completely devoid of fear. "Please call the police, Beatrice. I would absolutely love to explain to the authorities how you cornered me at a medical clinic, snatched my keys, and stole a $90,000 vehicle registered under my name. And then I can show them the police report I filed an hour ago for grand theft auto. I am sure your church friends will love watching their beloved hostess get handcuffed in her own living room." The threat hit Beatrice like a physical blow. Her raised hand dropped and she glanced nervously over her shoulder at the 30 women who were now whispering frantically among themselves. The fake, perfect image she had spent years cultivating was cracking wide open for all of high society Atlanta to see. The whispers were growing louder. The scandal was already brewing in their minds. They were judging her, evaluating the sheer magnitude of the public humiliation unfolding right before their eyes. From the corner of the room, my dad took a single heavy step forward. He did not say a word. He just stood there holding my sleeping son, his tall, broad frame casting a long shadow across the marble floor. But his silent, menacing presence sent a very clear message to everyone in the room. If they touched me, they would have to go through him. The caterers froze in their tracks. The guests held their breath. No one dared to intervene. Chloe was still crying about her dress, trying to dab at the silk with a cocktail napkin, but her hands were trembling. She looked at Beatrice for help, but Beatrice was too busy trying to salvage her own reputation to care about a ruined dress. "Take it off," I repeated. keeping my focus locked entirely on Chloe. My tone was absolute ice, chilling the air between us even further. I am not playing games with you, Chloe. If you make me ask you a third time, I am not going to wait for you to unclasp it. I will rip it right off your neck myself. Give me my keys and give me my diamonds. Before Chloe could even reach for the clasp of the necklace, heavy hurried footsteps thundered from the grand sweeping staircase. The rhythmic pounding drew the attention of every single woman in the room. I did not have to turn my head to know who it was. It was Marcus, my husband. The man who had stood at an altar and vowed before God to protect me. He was rushing down the curved marble steps, taking two at a time, wearing a custom navy suit that I had bought for his birthday. He looked every bit the polished, successful Atlanta businessman he desperately pretended to be. Marcus stopped at the bottom of the stairs, taking in the chaotic scene before him. He saw Chloe sobbing and dabbing at her ruined white silk dress. He saw his mother Beatrice holding a hand to her chest, playing the role of the traumatized hostess. He saw the high society church ladies whispering behind their manicured hands. And then he looked at me. He did not look at my blistered, bleeding feet. He did not look at our 6-month-old son sleeping safely in my father's arms. He marched directly toward me, his face twisted into an ugly mask of rage and embarrassment. "Nia, what is wrong with you?" he yelled, his voice booming across the silent living room. "Have you completely lost your mind?" He closed the distance between us, invading my personal space. I did not step back. I planted my bare feet firmly on the marble floor, lifting my chin to look him dead in the eye. From where I stood, I felt like a fortress made of solid stone. He was trying to tower over me, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me into submission, but I felt 10 feet tall. His anger washed over me like a light breeze, completely, entirely useless. "You come into my mother's house and assault my family," Marcus demanded, pointing a trembling finger in my face. "You embarrass us in front of these respected guests. Do you have any idea how hard my mother worked to put this event together? You are acting like an unhinged street rat." I kept my expression completely flat. "You told me to walk home, Marcus?" I said, my voice steady and clear, carrying effortlessly across the room. "Your mother and sister-in-law stole my car, left me and your infant son stranded on a highway in 90-degree heat, and you texted me to walk home and learn some humility." Marcus scoffed, waving his hand dismissively, as if leaving his wife and child to suffer heat stroke was a minor inconvenience. "I told you to cool off," he snapped. "You disrespected them first. You refused to help Chloe with her business loan. You have always been jealous of the bond my family shares. But this psychotic display ends right now." He pointed down at the expensive Persian rug beneath my feet. "Get on your knees," he ordered. The collective sharp intake of breath from the church ladies echoed through the room. Even Chloe stopped crying for a second, staring at Marcus in shock. My father, Winston, took a slow, heavy step forward from the foyer, his eyes narrowing dangerously. I raised one hand slightly, signaling my dad to hold his ground. I did not need rescuing. I wanted to hear exactly how far my husband was willing to go. I stared at Marcus, my face a mask of absolute calm. "Excuse me?" I asked softly. I said. "Get on your knees." Marcus repeated, his voice rising desperately, trying to assert his dominance in front of his mother's wealthy friends. "You are going to get down on your knees right now and apologize to my mother. You are going to beg Chloe for forgiveness. You are going to humiliate yourself the exact same way you just tried to humiliate them." Beatrice suddenly stood a little taller behind him, a smug, victorious smile creeping onto her lips. She had her golden boy defending her honor just as she had conditioned him to do his entire life. When I did not move a single muscle, Marcus stepped even closer. His breath was hot and reeked of the expensive scotch he had been drinking upstairs. "You think you are so special?" he sneered, lowering his voice into a vicious, vicious whisper, but failing to keep it quiet enough to hide from the room. "You think you can walk in here and make demands? You are nothing, Nia. You are just a basic, lowly accountant. You sit in a boring gray cubicle crunching numbers all day, while I am out here building real wealth. You are a leech on this family's good name. You should be kissing the ground my mother walks on for welcoming a nobody like you into this lifestyle. I looked at the man I had married. I looked at the tailored suit I paid for, the expensive watch I bought him for our anniversary, and the arrogant sneer on his face. He truly believed he was the king of a castle built entirely on my credit. He actually believed his own lies. I am an accountant, I said evenly, my voice slicing through his arrogant tirade. A forensic accountant, Marcus. And it is very interesting that you bring up who is leeching off of whom. Marcus ignored my words completely, too blinded by his own fragile ego. He thought my calm response was a sign of weakness. He thought he was winning. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, and delivered his ultimate threat. If you do not drop to your knees and apologize right this second, I will divorce you, Nia. I will call my lawyers tomorrow morning, and I will take full custody of Malik. You know how this city works. You know the judges in this county respect my family name. I will paint you as an unstable, violent, unfit mother who attacks people at church gatherings. You will leave this marriage with absolutely nothing, and you will never see your son again. Do you understand me? Get on your knees or lose your child. It was the ultimate betrayal. He was using the child I had just carried miles down a scorching highway to protect as a weapon to force my submission. He was willing to strip a mother of her baby just to protect his mother's fragile social standing and a stolen diamond necklace. The threat hung in the air, heavy and vile. Beatrice smirked, crossing her arms in triumph. Chloe let out a small, relieved sigh, finally reaching behind her neck to unclasp the diamond necklace, thinking she no longer had to return it. They all thought they had broken me. They thought the threat of losing my son would bring me crashing down to the marble floor in tears. Instead, a slow, chilling smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of surrender. It was the smile of a predator that had finally backed its prey into an inescapable corner. I looked Marcus dead in the eyes. The absolute panic hiding behind his false bravado was suddenly so glaringly obvious. He was a small, weak man trying to cast a giant shadow. "You are going to take my son?" I asked, my tone dropping into a deadly quiet register. "You are going to use your high-powered lawyers to leave me with nothing." "That is right," Marcus spat, adjusting his suit jacket, trying to look commanding. "So you better start apologizing." I did not blink. I did not flinch. I felt an unbreakable armor lock into place around my heart. Any lingering shred of love or affection I had left for this man evaporated instantly, leaving behind nothing but cold, hard strategy. "I am not apologizing to anyone," I said, my voice ringing with absolute, undeniable authority. "And you are not taking my son anywhere, Marcus, because you do not have high-powered lawyers, you do not have real wealth, and starting tomorrow morning you are not going to have a single dime to your name." Marcus scoffed loudly, shaking his head. "You are delusional." He laughed, turning back to look at his mother for validation. "She has completely lost her mind." "No, Marcus," I replied, stepping forward and forcing him to step back. "I have never seen things more clearly. You demanded an apology, but what you are going to get is a reckoning." I held out my hand, palm up, toward Chloe without breaking eye contact with my husband. "Chloe, place my diamonds in my hand right now before I have the police sitting outside arrest you for receiving stolen property." Chloe whimpered, fumbling with the clasp. The heavy diamond pendant dropped into my open palm with a soft clink. I closed my fist around it, the cool metal grounding me. Marcus watched in stunned silence as his sister-in-law completely folded under my command. His jaw dropped as he finally realized the police were actually parked outside his mother's mansion. The power dynamic in the room flipped entirely. Marcus was no longer the imposing husband dictating terms. He was suddenly a very confused, very frightened little boy, realizing he had picked a fight with a woman who held every single key to his destruction. I dropped the heavy diamond pendant into the deep pocket of my skirt. The cool metal resting against my thigh felt like the first piece of a reclaimed kingdom. Marcus was still standing there, his mouth slightly open, stripped of his leverage. But Beatrice was not a woman who surrendered easily. She had spent decades perfecting the art of manipulation, and she was not about to let me dismantle her perfect high society image in front of the Atlanta Church Council without a fight. She grabbed her phone from the grand piano. Her fingers flew across the screen dialing 911. Her entire demeanor shifted in a fraction of a second. The bitter, snarling woman vanished and was instantly replaced by a terrified, frail, elderly victim. She pressed the phone to her ear and let out a loud theatrical sob that echoed through the living room. "Please send help immediately," she cried into the receiver, her voice shaking with manufactured panic. "My daughter-in-law has lost her mind. She broke into my home. She assaulted my family. She is demanding money and jewelry. Please hurry, we are terrified she might hurt the baby." I looked straight ahead right at you. I want you to picture this. A woman who just stole my $90,000 car and left me to bake on a highway is now sobbing into a phone claiming I am the violent intruder. I could not help it. A slow, cynical smirk crept across my face. The sheer audacity of her performance was almost impressive. She was playing the victim card with the absolute desperation of a cornered animal completely oblivious to the trap closing around her. Heavy footsteps sounded on the marble porch outside. The two patrol officers my dad had requested to wait down the street had finally approached the open double doors. They stepped into the grand foyer, their hands resting cautiously near their utility belts, taking in the chaotic scene. Beatrice practically threw herself at the older officer. She clutched the sleeve of his uniform, pointing a trembling, manicured finger directly at me. "Officer, thank God you are here," she gasped, leaning heavily against Marcus for support. "That woman forced her way into my home. She threw glass at my daughter-in-law. Look at her ruined dress. She has been screaming and making threats. You need to remove her right now before she does something worse." Marcus puffed out his chest, suddenly finding his courage now that he had armed men in the room to back him up. "She is having a severe mental breakdown, officer," he stated, using his most professional and concerned husband voice. "She has been incredibly unstable lately. I tried to de-escalate the situation peacefully, but she became violent. We just want her removed from the property before she endangers my son any further." The chorus of wealthy churchwomen murmured their agreement, creating a wall of sound against me. "It was terrifying," one woman whispered loudly to the younger officer. "She just marched in here like a wild animal, completely unprovoked. We were fearing for our lives." The older officer gently detached Beatrice's hands from his uniform and took a few deliberate steps toward me. He looked at my disheveled appearance. He took in my messy hair, my sweat-stained clothes, and the dried blood on my bare feet. Then he looked around at the pristine mansion, the crystal chandeliers, and the impeccably dressed guests. The visual bias was undeniable. In his eyes, I looked exactly like the deranged trespasser they were describing, causing trouble for a respectable, wealthy family. "Mom," the officer said, his voice firm and authoritative. "The homeowner has requested that you leave the premises. I need you to step outside right now. We can discuss your side of the story on the front lawn, but you cannot remain in this house." Chloe let out a loud, vindicated sniffle from the corner, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Beatrice stood tall behind the officers, a smug, triumphant smile, completely replacing her fake tears. She looked at me as if I were a piece of trash finally being swept out to the curb. Marcus crossed his arms over his chest, shaking his head with fake pity. "You heard the officer," Nia. Marcus sneered, his voice dripping with absolute condescension. "It is over. Get out of my mother's house before I let them put you in handcuffs. I will have my lawyers contact you tomorrow about custody arrangements. You brought this entirely on yourself." They thought they had won. The entire room looked at me with a mixture of disgust and satisfaction, fully believing I had just lost my marriage, my child, and my dignity in one fell swoop. They thought I was walking out of those grand mahogany doors with absolutely nothing. They were celebrating my demise right to my face, waiting for me to lower my head and walk away in shame. I just stood there looking at their gloating faces, letting them savor their fake victory for just a few more seconds. I did not panic. I did not beg the officers to listen to me. I let the tension stretch across the room because I knew exactly what they did not know. The higher they built their pedestal of lies, the harder the impact would be when I finally shattered the foundation. The older police officer took another step toward me, his hand extended to guide me toward the front door. He fully expected me to lower my head and shuffle out in disgrace. But before his hand could even brush my shoulder, my father stepped smoothly between us. Winston did not raise his hands, and he did not raise his voice. He simply adjusted his tailored suit jacket and pulled a crisp manila folder from his inside breast pocket. "Sergeant Miller," my father said, his voice echoing with the unmistakable authority of a man who spent 30 years dominating courtrooms. "I believe there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding who is actually committing a crime here today." The older officer stopped in his tracks. He blinked, looking at my father closely for the first time. The dim lighting of the foyer had obscured my father's face, but now standing under the bright crystal chandelier, recognition flashed across the officer's features. "Mr. Winston?" he asked, his tone instantly shifting from authoritative to respectful. "I did not realize you were here, sir. I told you on the phone that we would be having a very polite, very legal conversation today, Sergeant," my dad replied calmly. He handed the thick folder over to the officer. "And we are going to start with the vehicle currently parked in the center of the driveway. The white Tesla Model X." Marcus let out a loud, arrogant laugh, stepping forward to stand beside his mother. "Are you seriously trying to play lawyer right now, Winston? That car belongs to me and my wife. It is marital property. My mother has every right to use it. You and Nia are just making fools of yourselves in front of the police." My dad did not even look at Marcus. He kept his eyes locked on the sergeant, who was now opening the folder and reviewing the documents inside. "If you look at the first page, Sergeant, my dad instructed, you will see the original bill of sale and the title for the vehicle. You will notice the purchase date is exactly 14 months before my daughter married that man. You will also see the attached bank statements, proving the vehicle was purchased outright, with a single wire transfer from an account solely in Nia's name. Under the law, that vehicle is a premarital asset. It belongs entirely and exclusively to my daughter." Marcus's smug smile began to slip. "That is a lie," he stammered, taking a step closer to the officers. "My name is on the registration. Tell them, Nia. Tell them my name is on the paperwork." I leaned back slightly, crossing my arms over my chest. I felt completely grounded, entirely in control of the game. "Yes, Marcus, your name is on the registration," I said, my voice cool and detached. "I added you as an authorized driver last year because you begged me to help boost your miserable credit score so you could apply for a new credit card. But being an authorized driver does not grant you ownership, and it certainly does not give you the right to hand my keys over to your mother." The sergeant flipped to the second page of the folder, his expression growing increasingly serious. "And this document here, Mr. Winston, that is the official police report my daughter filed exactly 1 hour ago," my dad said, his voice ringing through the silent living room. "Reporting the vehicle as stolen. The perpetrators ambushed her at a medical facility, seized the keys directly from her hands, and drove off, leaving her and an infant stranded on the side of the highway." The younger officer, who had been standing quietly by the door, suddenly rested his hand on his radio. He looked directly at Beatrice and Chloe. The entire dynamic of the room shifted in an instant. The police were no longer looking at me as a trespasser. They were looking at my mother-in-law and sister-in-law as prime suspects in a felony grand theft auto case. "Ma'am," the sergeant said, turning his full attention to Beatrice. His voice had lost all the gentle sympathy he had shown her just moments before. "Do you currently have the keys to the white Tesla parked outside?" Beatrice swallowed hard. The color drained completely from her face, leaving her looking gray and terrified. The high society church ladies who had been whispering insults about me just minutes ago were now completely silent, their eyes wide with shock, as they watched their beloved hostess get interrogated in her own living room. I am her mother-in-law," Beatrice stammered, taking a shaky step backward. She clutched her pearl necklace, her fingers trembling. "It was just a family misunderstanding. Marcus told me I could borrow the car. He gave me permission. I did not steal anything from anyone." "Your son cannot give permission to take a vehicle he does not own," the sergeant stated flatly. "The registered owner of the vehicle is standing right here, and she has reported it stolen. I am going to ask you one more time, Mom. Where are the keys to the vehicle?" Chloe let out a panicked whimper from the corner of the room. She was still dripping with champagne, her ruined white silk dress clinging to her shaking body. She looked frantically from the police officers to Beatrice and then to Marcus. "Marcus, do something," she cried out. "Tell them we did not steal it. Tell them we are family." Marcus stepped forward, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Look, officers, let us just calm down. My wife is just being hysterical. She is mad because my mother and Chloe took the car to run some errands for this party. We can just give the keys back right now and forget this whole thing. Nia, tell them to drop it." I looked at Marcus, feeling a deep, profound sense of disgust. He was still trying to order me around, still trying to use his fake authority to sweep his family's crimes under the rug. He actually thought he could just command me to drop a felony charge. "I am not dropping anything," I said, my voice slicing through the heavy air. "I want my keys. And I want the people who left my baby to roast in the Georgia heat held fully accountable." The sergeant nodded sharply. He turned back to Beatrice and stepped into her personal space. "Mom, produce the keys right now. If we have to search you or this property, you will be placed in handcuffs immediately." Beatrice let out a strangled gasp. She looked around the room, her eyes pleading with the wealthy women she had tried so hard to impress. But none of them stepped forward to defend her. They were actively backing away from her, wanting no part of a criminal investigation. The shame was absolute and crushing. The glorious high society tea party she had meticulously planned to show off her fake wealth had turned into the exact moment her entire fraudulent existence was exposed to her peers. With shaking hands, Beatrice reached into the pocket of her tailored ivory blazer. She slowly pulled out the sleek black key fob to my Tesla. Her fingers were trembling so violently, she nearly dropped it on the marble floor. "Hand it to the owner," the sergeant ordered, his tone leaving zero room for negotiation. Beatrice hesitated. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in the entire history of our relationship, she looked genuinely terrified of me. She took 2 slow, agonizing steps forward and held out the key fob. I did not reach out to take it. I just stood there, letting her hold it out in the air, forcing her to feel the full weight of her humiliation in front of her friends. I let a full 10 seconds pass. 10 seconds of agonizing silence while the matriarch of the family stood before me with a shaking hand, completely stripped of her power. Finally, I reached out and plucked the keys from her fingers. "Thank you, Beatrice," I said, my voice a soft, deadly whisper. "But we are not finished yet." The sergeant turned to Winston. "Mr. Winston, we have recovered the stolen property. How would your daughter like to proceed with the charges against these 2 women?" Chloe burst into loud, hysterical tears. She threw her hands over her face, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please," she wailed. "I did not want to take the car. Beatrice made me do it. She told me Marcus said it was fine. Please do not arrest me. I cannot go to jail." Beatrice whipped her head around to glare at her daughter-in-law, the golden girl she had praised and elevated above me for years. "You traitor!" Beatrice hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You were the one who wanted to drive it to the salon to show off to your friends. Do not you dare blame this entirely on me." I watched them turn on each other like cornered rats. The loyalty they claimed to have, the superior family bond they constantly threw in my face, disintegrated the second they faced real consequences. It was pathetic, and it was exactly what they deserved. Marcus was hyperventilating now. He grabbed his hair, pacing in a tight circle. "Nia, please," he begged, turning to me with wild, desperate eyes. "Do not press charges. If my mother gets arrested, it will ruin my reputation. My clients will find out. Please, just take the car and let this go. I will do whatever you want." I looked at Marcus, leaning back slightly, settling into my stance. The fear radiating off him was palpable. He thought the worst thing that could happen today was his mother getting arrested for grand theft auto. He thought my master plan was simply getting my car back and teaching them a lesson about boundaries. He had absolutely no idea that the car was just the appetizer. I turned to the sergeant. "Officer," I said clearly and calmly, "I am willing to place the grand theft auto charges on a temporary hold for the next few minutes. Because as much as I would love to see them in handcuffs right now, there is another much larger issue we need to address regarding this property." Beatrice gasped, clutching her chest. Marcus stopped pacing, staring at me in total confusion. "What property?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. "What are you talking about, Naya?" I smiled. It was a cold, calculated smile. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second sleek manila folder. I tapped it gently against the palm of my hand, the sound echoing sharply in the quiet room. I am talking about the very expensive, very lavish mansion we are currently standing in. Marcus, I said. The one your mother claims to own. The one you have been secretly funneling my money into for the last 3 years, because it is time everyone in this room learns exactly who pays the bills around here. Marcus's face turned a violent shade of purple. The sheer panic in his eyes was instantly masked by a desperate, volatile rage. He lunged forward, pointing a shaking finger toward the front door. "Get out of my mother's house," he roared, his voice cracking under the strain. "You are insane, Nia. You are completely delusional. This is Beatrice's home, and you have no right to stand here spouting nonsense. Get out before I physically remove you myself." I did not flinch. I did not move a single inch backward. Instead, my eyes snapped away from his flushed face and locked onto the massive 85-inch smart television mounted directly above the grand marble fireplace. My gaze swept across the room, taking in the sheer size of the screen, currently displaying a tasteless slideshow of Beatrice posing at various charity galas. It was the perfect canvas. I reached into my designer tote bag and pulled out my iPad. I unlocked the screen with a swift tap of my finger. Because Marcus was too arrogant to ever handle the household utility bills, he completely forgot that I was the one who set up the high-speed internet in this mansion. I knew the network. I knew the passwords. Within 3 seconds, I hit the screen mirroring button. The giant television above the fireplace flickered. Beatrice's slideshow vanished. In its place, a crisp, highly detailed financial spreadsheet appeared, illuminated in blinding high definition for every single wealthy church lady in the room to see. Marcus froze. His arm dropped to his side. Beatrice let out a short, terrified gasp. "For the last 5 years, Marcus has told everyone in this room that I am just a basic accountant," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the silent living room. "He told you I sit in a gray cubicle, crunching boring numbers to pay off my student loans while he builds real wealth." But Marcus left out a very important detail about my career. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, making sure my voice carried to the very back of the room, where the caterers were now standing completely still. "I am a senior forensic accountant," I announced. "My everyday job consists of tracking down corporate embezzlers, dismantling money laundering rings, and finding exactly where arrogant liars hide their stolen cash. I find missing money for a living, and when I noticed discrepancies in my own household finances, I applied my professional skills to my own marriage." I tapped my iPad screen. The spreadsheet on the giant television zoomed in, highlighting a massive column of transactions in bright, glaring red. "Let us talk about who actually funds this high society lifestyle." I continued pacing slowly in front of the fireplace. "Marcus, you told me the $80,000 missing from our joint savings account was tied up in a secure long-term real estate investment. But as we can all see on the screen, that money was quietly funneled into a shadow account. And what did that shadow account pay for?" I swiped to the next slide. A series of itemized receipts flashed onto the screen. "It paid for this very tea party," I stated, pointing at the television. "The imported orchids on these tables, the vintage champagne. You are all drinking the artisan catering. It was all paid for with money." Marcus siphoned from the college fund I set up for my 6-month-old son. A loud collective gasp rippled through the crowd of churchwomen. Several of them immediately set their champagne flutes down on the nearest tables, looking at the crystal glasses as if they were suddenly filled with poison. Beatrice grabbed the edge of the grand piano, her knuckles turning white. "It is a lie," Beatrice screeched, her voice shrill and desperate. "She doctored those papers. Marcus is a highly successful investment broker. He provides for his family out of the goodness of his heart." I swiped my screen again. An entirely new ledger appeared. This one featured transactions labeled with offshore routing numbers. "Is that so, Beatrice?" I asked, tilting my head. "Then please explain these wire transfers." Marcus claimed his brother Jamal was struggling to find legitimate work in Atlanta. He asked me to be patient with him. but these bank records show over $40,000 wired directly to illegal offshore sports betting websites over the last 9 months. I turned my sharp gaze toward Chloe, who was trying to shrink into the background, her ruined white dress clinging to her. Jamal does not have a job, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal, quiet tone. Your husband is a gambling addict, and Marcus has been secretly paying off his massive gambling debts using the bonus I earned from my firm last year. Chloe covered her mouth with her hands, letting out a muffled sob. I was not done with her. I tapped the screen one more time, bringing up a series of high-end retail receipts. And Chloe, while we are on the subject of stolen funds, let us talk about your wardrobe. The Chanel bag you brought to church last Sunday, the red sole shoes you wore to brunch, the diamond earrings you just tried to walk away with. All purchased using a secondary credit card Marcus opened in my name without my knowledge. You have been parading around Atlanta playing the role of a wealthy socialite funded entirely by a black woman you constantly disrespect and treat like the help. The sheer level of humiliation in the room was suffocating. The women of the church council were practically vibrating with scandalized shock. They were looking at Beatrice and Chloe, not with admiration but with absolute naked disgust. In the high society circles Beatrice worshipped, there was nothing more shameful than fake wealth, and nothing more unforgivable than stealing from your own grandchild. Marcus was panicking. His breathing was ragged and loud. He scrambled toward the fireplace, desperately searching for the power cord to the television. "Turn it off!" he bellowed, tearing at the wires hidden behind the marble mantel. "Turn that screen off right now, Nia. This is illegal. You cannot display my private financial records." He yanked a cord from the wall, but it was the wrong one. The television remained glowing brightly, displaying his theft for the entire world to judge. "You gave up your right to privacy the moment you stole from your own son Marcus," I said, standing my ground as he frantically clawed at the wall. "You thought because I was quiet, because I prioritized peace in our home, that I was stupid. You thought you could bleed me dry to subsidize your mother's delusions of grandeur, and I would just smile and write the checks." I walked directly up to him, stopping just inches away from his trembling, sweating frame. "I am a forensic accountant, Marcus. I build airtight federal cases for a living. I know about the fake consulting company you set up in Delaware. I know about the forged signature you used to empty the secondary brokerage account. I know every single time you transferred money to your mother to pay for her country club membership, her designer suits, and her lavish vacations. I have a paper trail so thick and so undeniable that it will take a jury less than 10 minutes to convict you." Marcus stopped pulling at the wires. He slowly turned around to face me. His shoulders slumped. The arrogant, dominant man who had demanded I drop to my knees just minutes ago was completely gone. In his place stood a broken, terrified fraud facing the utter annihilation of his entire existence. Beatrice could not handle the silence. She could not handle the judgmental stares of her peers burning into her back. She stepped forward, throwing her arms out in a wild, desperate gesture of defiance. "So what if he helped me?" she screamed, her voice echoing shrilly off the high ceilings. "He is my son. A good son takes care of his mother. It is a man's duty to provide for his family. That money belongs to him just as much as it belongs to you. You are his wife. Your money is his money, and he has every right to spend it on the home we live in. This is my house. I am the matriarch here. You can flash all the spreadsheets you want, but you cannot touch my home." I looked at Beatrice, letting her manic, desperate defense hang in the heavy air. She had just handed me the perfect opening for the final devastating blow. I tapped my iPad, locking the screen and slipping it back into my tote bag. I did not need the television for this next part. I just needed her to look me straight in the eyes while I tore her entire world down to the absolute foundation. "You call this your home, Beatrice?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet pitch. "You claim you are the matriarch of this sprawling estate. Let us thoroughly explore that claim right here and right now." Beatrice lifted her chin, attempting to summon the haughty, aristocratic persona she had worn like impenetrable armor for decades. "This house has been in my name for 15 years, she spat, her voice trembling slightly, despite her best efforts to sound commanding. My late husband bought it and left it to me. Marcus pays the mortgage every single month because that is his sacred duty to his mother. You cannot just wave a tablet around and erase legal ownership, Nia. You are completely out of your depth. I took a slow, deliberate step toward her. The space between us shrank and I locked my eyes directly onto hers. I did not blink. I did not waver. I let the absolute certainty of my victory settle heavily over the room, pressing down on her shoulders. Do you remember what happened last November, Beatrice? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly level. Do you remember when Marcus's reckless real estate investments completely collapsed? The bank was ready to foreclose on this exact property. You were packing your designer bags, crying in the hallway about how the church council would react when they saw the moving trucks parked on your pristine front lawn. Beatrice swallowed hard. The memory of that near humiliation clearly struck a severe nerve, but she forced a dismissive scoff. Marcus fixed it, she said, crossing her arms defensively. He negotiated a brilliant restructuring with a private investment firm. He saved my home because he is a real man who takes care of his family. I let out a soft, humorless laugh that echoed against the high vaulted ceilings. Marcus did not negotiate anything, Beatrice. Marcus panicked and defaulted. He was completely out of options and drowning in debt. The bank sold the deed to a private holding company just to recoup their losses. A corporate entity named Cypress Point Holdings LLC purchased the deed to this property for pennies on the dollar, entirely legally and entirely under the radar. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his face turning a sickly shade of ash gray. He knew the name of the company. He had been writing massive checks to them every single month, thinking he was paying off a faceless corporate lender. "And who do you think owns Cypress Point Holdings?" Beatrice I asked, tilting my head slightly. She stared at me, her eyes darting frantically between my calm face and Marcus's terrified expression. "What are you saying?" she whispered, the false bravado finally bleeding out of her voice. I reached into my manila folder and pulled out a single sheet of heavy watermarked paper. It was the official state business registration combined with the primary property deed. I held it up not for her to take, but for her to see the bold black ink printed clearly at the bottom of the page. "I am the sole proprietor and managing member of Cypress Point Holdings," I stated, my voice ringing with absolute, undeniable authority. "I bought the debt, Beatrice. I paid off the bank using the money I earned from my forensic accounting firm. I stepped in and saved this house from foreclosure because I foolishly believed Marcus was going to turn his life around. I thought I was protecting my husband's family, but in doing so, the deed transferred directly to my holding company." The silence in the grand living room was absolute and deafening. The wealthy church ladies were frozen in place, completely captivated by the total unraveling of the woman they had once feared and respected. Nobody dared to take a sip of their champagne. Nobody dared to breathe. "That is a lie!" Beatrice shrieked. Her hands flew to her head, her perfectly styled hair suddenly looking frantic and disheveled. "You cannot own this house. Marcus pays the mortgage. I see the bank statements every single month. He pays for the roof over our heads." "Marcus pays rent," I corrected sharply, stepping even closer. "The checks he writes every month do not go to a banking institution. They go directly into my holding accounts. You have been living here as my tenant, Beatrice. You have been sleeping under a roof that I legally own, walking on marble floors that I paid for, and hosting lavish tea parties in a living room that belongs entirely to me." The brutal reality of the situation hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled slightly and she had to grab the edge of a velvet armchair to keep from collapsing onto the floor. She looked at Marcus, her eyes wide and pleading, begging her golden child to tell her this was just a cruel, elaborate joke. "Marcus, tell me she is lying," Beatrice cried out, her voice cracking with raw, unfiltered panic. "Tell me we own this house. Tell them this is my mansion." Marcus could not look his mother in the eye. He stared down at his expensive Italian leather shoes, his chest heaving as he struggled to draw a breath. "I did not know, Mom," he stammered, his voice weak, pathetic, and stripped of all its former arrogance. "I thought it was just a regular investment firm. I had no idea Nia set up the LLC. The lawyers handled the paperwork, and I just signed it to keep the house from going to public auction. I did not read the fine print." "You signed it because you are a careless, arrogant fool," I said, turning my fierce gaze on my husband. You never read the fine print, Marcus. You never look at the operating agreements because you think you are the smartest man in every room. You just care about the appearance of wealth, not the actual mechanics of it. And that careless, arrogant stupidity just cost your mother her entire kingdom. Chloe, who had been standing frozen in her ruined silk dress, let out a loud, dramatic wail from the corner of the room. "We are going to be homeless," she sobbed, clutching her face with trembling hands. "Jamal does not have a job because he gambled everything away, and we have absolutely nowhere to go. We live in the guest house. We do not have any money saved up." "You live in my guest house," I corrected smoothly, not sparing her a single ounce of sympathy. "And you are right, Chloe. You do have nowhere to go. Maybe you should have thought about that before you helped steal my car and paraded around in my mother's diamonds." I turned my attention entirely back to Beatrice. The older woman was hyperventilating, her hand clutching her pearl necklace, as if it could somehow save her from the nightmare unfolding around her. Her entire identity, her social standing, her towering pride, and her toxic superiority were all intrinsically tied to this massive brick mansion. She used this house to intimidate people. She used this house to make me feel small. Without it, she was absolutely nothing. "You used to walk past me in the hallway of this house and tell me I should be grateful you allowed me to take up space," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal quiet tone that demanded total attention. "You treated me like the hired help while you spent my hard-earned money. You let your daughter-in-law disrespect me because her skin is white, and you thought that gave her more value in your twisted high society circles. You took my car today and left me bleeding on the side of a scorching highway because you thought you held all the power and I would just take the abuse." I took one final step forward, closing the gap completely. The focus in the room narrowed, pulling tight around us. I locked onto Beatrice's terrified, widened eyes, watching her defensive walls shatter and crush into dust beneath the sheer weight of my financial execution. Every lie she had ever told, every fake image she had ever projected was currently burning to the ground right in front of her most important peers. "But you have no power, Beatrice," I whispered, ensuring every single word pierced directly into her soul. "You have no car, you have no money to your name, and as of this exact moment you have no home. This house is mine." Beatrice let out a strangled guttural sound. It was not a scream, and it was not a cry. It was the devastating sound of a woman whose entire reality had just been violently ripped away from her. She looked around the grand living room, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the imported rugs, and the expensive floral arrangements as if she was seeing them for the very last time, because she was. The wealthy church ladies began to quietly shuffle toward the front door, setting their glasses down and gathering their expensive purses. They had seen enough. The scandal was complete, and none of them wanted to be associated with a family that was about to be thrown out onto the street. They averted their eyes, avoiding Beatrice's desperate, pleading gaze as they hurried past her, eager to distance themselves from the catastrophic fallout. The elite society she had worshipped was abandoning her in record time. My dad Winston stepped forward from the foyer, his presence acting as a massive, immovable anchor of support. He did not smile, but the fierce, immense pride radiating from him was unmistakable. He had watched his daughter transform from a bruised victim into an absolute conqueror right before his eyes. "I think it is time we conclude this gathering," my dad said, his deep voice cutting cleanly through the sounds of Chloe's sobbing and Marcus's panicked, ragged breathing. "The authorities are still waiting outside, and we have official eviction protocols to discuss with the current tenants." I nodded slowly, keeping my eyes locked on Beatrice for one final, devastating moment. I had taken back my car, my diamonds, and my dignity. But most importantly, I had taken back my power and my future. The days of Nia, the quiet, accommodating accountant, were over forever. "Let us move on to the paperwork," I said, my voice ringing clear and triumphant in the magnificent space that finally and truly belonged to me. Imagine you are standing right behind me in that grand living room, looking over my right shoulder. I want you to share this exact view with me. Look past my shoulder and watch the absolute destruction of a woman who spent a decade making me feel completely invisible. You could literally see the exact moment the remaining color drained from Beatrice's face. Her perfectly powdered cheeks turned a sickly pale gray. The fake kingdom she had built on my dime was burning to the ash, and I was holding the match. My dad stepped forward, the heels of his polished leather shoes clicking with terrifying precision against the imported marble floor. He unbuttoned his tailored suit jacket and reached into his inside pocket. He did not pull out another spreadsheet. He retrieved a thick stack of heavy legal papers bound tightly with a red court seal. He did not hand the document to Marcus. He walked directly up to Beatrice and pressed the rigid paperwork right against her chest, forcing her to take it with trembling hands. Notice of eviction. My father stated, his voice booming and echoing off the vaulted ceilings like a judge's gavel. Authorized and signed by the Fulton County Magistrate Judge this morning. You are officially 90 days delinquent on your lease agreement, Beatrice. Under Georgia law, your tenancy is terminated effective immediately. Beatrice stared down at the red seal, her eyes wide and completely uncomprehending. She shook her head violently, causing her perfect hair to finally unravel and fall around her face in messy strands. No, she gasped, her voice cracking into a shrill, panicked wheeze. That is impossible. I give Marcus the check for the mortgage every single month. I gave him the money. I never miss a payment. She whipped around to face her son, her eyes frantic and wild. Marcus, tell him, she demanded, gripping the lapels of his expensive suit. Tell him I gave you the money for the house. Tell him this is a mistake. Marcus physically recoiled from his mother's piercing stare. He looked like a cornered rat, sweating profusely and refusing to make eye contact with anyone in the room. He opened his mouth, but absolutely no sound came out. His jaw worked up and down, but the arrogant golden boy had finally run out of lies. I stepped in, closing the distance until I was standing right beside my father. The power radiating between us was undeniable. I will tell you exactly where your money went, Beatrice, I said, keeping my tone conversational and light, which only made the impact that much more devastating. You gave Marcus your money, thinking he was paying off a bank. But Marcus knew he was drowning. He knew he could not keep up the facade of being a wealthy broker. So instead of paying your rent to my holding company, he took your cash and funded a luxury lifestyle to keep up appearances for his brother and his precious sister-in-law. I turned my fierce gaze toward Chloe, who was currently trying to hide behind the grand piano, her ruined white silk dress clinging to her shaking frame. Tell me, Chloe, I said, my voice slicing through the heavy silence. How was that 2-week excursion to Tulum last month? Did you enjoy the private beach villa? Did you like the private yacht charter you posted all over your social media, bragging about how blessed and highly favored your family is? Did you enjoy sipping margaritas on the beach while your mother-in-law slipped into default and faced legal eviction? Chloe's jaw dropped open. She looked at Marcus and then at Beatrice, shaking her head wildly, as if trying to physically dodge the accusation. I did not know, she shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical wail. Marcus told Jamal it was a bonus from his investment firm. He told us to celebrate. He said business was booming. I did not know it was the rent money. I swear I did not know. Beatrice staggered backward, leaning heavily against a marble pillar for physical support. The betrayal hit her with the force of a freight train. She had literally funded her own daughter-in-law's luxury vacation while unknowingly securing her own eviction from high society. Marcus had sacrificed his mother's home just to keep Chloe and Jamal living in a fake fantasy world. But the absolute worst part for Beatrice was not the loss of the house or the stolen money. It was the audience. The highest-ranking members of her elite church council, the women she worshipped, feared, and constantly tried to impress, had paused their rapid exit. They stood huddled near the grand entryway, captivated by the sheer magnitude of the scandal unfolding before them. These were women who built their entire lives on reputation, grace, and financial superiority. The ultimate sin in their circle was not just being broke, it was stealing to look rich. Sister Martha, the formidable president of the church's elite auxiliary board, stepped out from the group of whispering women. She was a woman who commanded absolute respect in Atlanta high society. She adjusted her silk shawl and looked at Beatrice with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. Beatrice, Sister Martha said, her voice dripping with cold, lethal judgment. You have spent years looking down your nose at members of our congregation, judging their finances, judging their outfits, and questioning their faith. You paraded this white girl around our church, treating her like absolute royalty, while treating your own successful, intelligent black daughter-in-law like dirt beneath your shoes. You told us Nia was just a bitter, struggling accountant who dragged your son down. Sister Martha took a step closer, shaking her head in profound disappointment. And all this time you were living on stolen money and unpaid rent, in a house owned by the very woman you slandered. You let your son steal to fund a fake vacation. You are nothing but a hollow, fraudulent hypocrite, Beatrice. You are a disgrace to the council and a disgrace to this community. The words hit Beatrice harder than any physical strike ever could. Her entire identity was intrinsically tied to Sister Martha's approval. Her social standing was the only thing she valued more than breathing. "Martha, please," Beatrice begged, reaching a desperate, shaking hand toward the foyer. Tears of pure humiliation streamed down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. "It is a misunderstanding. My son lied to me. I did not know about the house. I am still a woman of God. I am still one of you. Please do not turn your back on me." Sister Martha did not even blink. Her expression remained as hard as stone. "Do not ever contact the council again, Beatrice. You are no longer welcome at our charity tables. You are no longer welcome at our social events. And do not bother showing up to service on Sunday. We have no room for thieves and liars in our sanctuary." With that final, crushing verdict, Sister Martha turned around. The remaining wealthy women turned in perfect unison, their designer heels clicking sharply against the floor as they marched out the double doors, leaving Beatrice entirely and completely isolated. The Whisper Network would have this story spread across every affluent neighborhood in Atlanta before the sun even went down. Beatrice's social death was absolute and permanent. Beatrice collapsed onto the velvet sofa, burying her face in her hands and sobbing loudly. It was not a quiet, dignified cry. It was the ugly, guttural wail of a woman whose entire universe had just been permanently shattered. She clutched the eviction notice in her lap, crying into the very document that proved her spectacular downfall. Looking over my shoulder, you would have seen my face perfectly calm. I did not feel a single ounce of pity for her. I did not feel bad for Marcus, who was now staring at his hands in complete defeat. I did not care about Chloe, who was crying in the corner over her ruined dress and her ruined vacation. I felt absolute pure vindication. For years they told me I was not good enough. For years they demanded respect while offering me nothing but scorn. Now they were standing in my house holding an eviction notice I authorized, surrounded by the ashes of their own toxic pride. The eviction notice sitting on her lap was not just a legal document. It was a mirror forcing Beatrice to look at the ugly, hollow truth of her own miserable existence. And I was going to enjoy every single second of watching them pack their bags. The air in the room seemed to spin, catching the frantic energy of a collapsing empire. If a camera were circling us right now, it would capture a perfect 360-degree view of absolute, unadulterated panic. My father and I stood like immovable stone pillars in the center of the room, while the fraudulent world Beatrice had built violently tore itself apart around us. But the sheer velocity of their destruction was about to accelerate. Suddenly, the heavy French doors leading from the sunlit patio swung wide open. Jamal strode into the living room, completely oblivious to the massacre that had just taken place. He was wearing a vibrant silk designer shirt that I knew for a fact cost $800, and he was holding a half-empty glass of imported bourbon. He swaggered in, jingling a set of keys in his free hand. It was the spare key fob to my white Tesla. "Mom, why are all your fancy friends practically running down the driveway?" Jamal asked loudly, a lazy, arrogant smirk plastered across his face. "And who turned off the jazz?" "Chloe. I told you I wanted to take the Tesla out for a spin before the catering crew packed up the good liquor." Jamal stopped dead in his tracks when he finally noticed the two uniformed police officers standing in the center of the room. His lazy smirk vanished instantly. The ice in his bourbon glass clinked loudly against the crystal as his hand began to tremble. His eyes darted from Beatrice sobbing on the sofa to Marcus, staring blankly at the wall and finally to my father and me. Sergeant Miller turned his attention away from Beatrice and locked onto the newcomer. His sharp eyes immediately dropped to the Tesla key fob dangling loosely from Jamal's fingers. "I will take those keys, son," the sergeant said, taking a purposeful step forward and holding out his hand. "And I am going to need to see your identification right now." Jamal took a quick step backward, his eyes darting frantically toward the open patio doors as if calculating his chances of making a run for it. "I do not have my ID on me," he stammered, his voice pitching an octave higher as his false bravado evaporated. "I am just staying in the guest house out back. I did not do anything wrong. Chloe gave me these keys. She said I could drive it." Chloe let out a fresh, agonizing wail from her place on the floor, betraying her husband without a single second of hesitation. "I did not give them to you," she shrieked, her voice hoarse and raw. "You took them off the kitchen counter. Do not bring me into this, Jamal. I already have enough problems." I stepped forward seamlessly, taking control of the narrative once again. "You really should not have shown your face today, Jamal," I said, my voice smooth and lethal, cutting through the tension. "Because while I was tracking the $40,000 Marcus stole from my accounts to cover your offshore sports betting, I noticed a few glaring inconsistencies in your personal financial records." Jamal swallowed hard, looking desperately at Marcus for backup, but his older brother was completely paralyzed, entirely useless in the face of my financial execution. "You see, Jamal?" I continued, pacing slowly as the two police officers began to flank him. "Gambling addicts rarely stop at just bleeding their own family dry. When Marcus finally cut you off last month because his own accounts were empty, you got desperate. You started opening high-limit credit lines, but you did not use your own name, did you? Because your credit score is effectively zero and you have not held a legitimate job in 4 years." My father, Winston, stepped up right beside the sergeant. He did not pull out a thick manila folder this time. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single slim red envelope. He handed it directly to the older officer without breaking eye contact with Jamal. "Jamal Davis," my dad stated, his voice ringing through the room with absolute precision. "My daughter ran a full forensic background check when she audited her husband's fraudulent transfers. She found a massive trail of stolen Social Security numbers linked directly to the IP address of the guest house located on this property. She immediately forwarded that information to the authorities in Florida, where the identities were originally stolen." Sergeant Miller opened the red envelope and scanned the single sheet of paper inside. His posture immediately stiffened, his hand reaching instinctively for the heavy radio clipped to his shoulder. "Dispatch. I need a priority warrant check on a Jamal Davis. Date of birth, August 9th, 1992. The few seconds it took for dispatch to respond felt like hours. The silence in the room was stretched so incredibly tight, it threatened to snap and take all the oxygen with it. "Confirming active felony warrant out of Miami-Dade County." The radio crackled, filling the quiet room with the harsh reality of law enforcement. "Multiple counts of identity theft and wire fraud. Proceed with extreme caution. Suspect is a known flight risk." Jamal dropped his bourbon glass. It shattered violently against the marble floor, sending shards of expensive crystal and amber liquid flying everywhere. He spun around, lunging for the open patio doors in a blind panic, but the younger police officer was much faster. He charged forward and tackled Jamal, shoving him hard against the side of the grand piano. A jarring, discordant crash of piano keys echoed through the mansion as Jamal's face was pressed firmly against the polished wood. "Jamal Davis, you are under arrest," Sergeant Miller shouted, stepping in to secure the suspect. He pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his utility belt. The sharp metallic clicking sound of the cuffs locking tightly around Jamal's wrists rang out like a final devastating verdict, and then total unadulterated chaos erupted. Chloe completely lost whatever fragile grip she had left on her sanity. She scrambled up from the floor, slipping wildly in the spilled champagne, and threw herself toward the officers. "You cannot arrest him!" she shrieked, her voice tearing at her vocal cords. "He is my husband. We are going to Tulum next week. You cannot do this to us. Do you know who we are?" The younger officer easily blocked her path, putting a firm hand on her shoulder and shoving her back. Mom, step back right now, or you will be placed under arrest for interfering with an active police investigation. Do not make me warn you again. Chloe fell to her knees, ripping at her own blonde hair. Her ruined white silk dress was now heavily stained with dirt, spilled alcohol, and floor wax. She looked absolutely feral, screaming and thrashing on the floor like a spoiled toddler throwing a tantrum. Her perfect wealthy lifestyle, her arrogant racial superiority, and her stolen designer wardrobe were all vanishing right before her eyes. She was married to a broke convicted felon, and she had absolutely nowhere to go. Beatrice tried to stand up, her hands reaching weakly toward her younger son, but her legs instantly gave out. She slumped back onto the sofa, clutching her chest and gasping for air, as if she were having a heart attack. Her precious family, the one she claimed was so fundamentally superior to me, was now reduced to a weeping mess on the floor and a handcuffed criminal pinned against a piano. I watched the entire chaotic scene unfold with my arms crossed, standing shoulder to shoulder with my father. The camera in my mind was spinning faster, capturing every angle of their complete humiliation. I had stripped away their stolen money, their fake home, their false reputation, and now their actual physical freedom. They were experiencing the exact level of terror and helplessness they had casually tried to inflict on me just a few hours ago on that blazing highway. Sergeant Miller hauled Jamal to his feet, yanking him upward by his handcuffed arms. Jamal's expensive silk shirt was torn at the shoulder, and his cheek was already bruising red from hitting the piano. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a pathetic, desperate kind of hatred. "You set me up!" he spat, struggling uselessly against the officer's iron grip. "You ruined my life, you vindictive witch." I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I did not ruin your life, Jamal. I replied, my tone perfectly, even and terrifyingly calm. I just handed the police the receipts. You ruined your own life the second you decided stealing from innocent people was easier than getting a job. Have a safe trip to Florida. As the officers dragged him toward the front doors, kicking and shouting useless curses, Chloe scrambled after them on her hands and knees, begging them to stop. The heavy mahogany doors closed firmly behind them, cutting off Jamal's shouts and leaving the grand living room echoing with nothing but Chloe's hysterical sobbing and Beatrice's ragged, wet breathing. The purge was almost complete, but there was still one person left in the room who needed to face his absolute ruin. The heavy slamming of the front door cut short Jamal and Chloe's pathetic screams, leaving the living room in a chilling silence. Now only Beatrice's choked gasps on the sofa, and Marcus, the only one left in the room, could be heard facing utter collapse. Imagine the camera slowly zooming in, smoothly moving, and then stopping at a close-up shot directly on my face. The lens capturing the cold, decisive, and utterly unwavering smile on my lips. 10 years of forbearance had finally turned into the sharpest blade. Marcus looked around the empty room, realizing his polished facade had been stripped away. He was utterly terrified. The arrogance and haughtiness of the successful broker from minutes ago had vanished without a trace. Marcus staggered toward me, then his knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the marble floor strewn with broken glass and champagne. He reached out with trembling hands to grab the hem of my dress, his voice choked with shameful cowardice. "Nia, I beg you," Marcus pleaded, tears and snot streaming down his polished face. "I was wrong, please forgive me. It's all my mother's and Jamal's fault. My mother always pressured me to provide for this extravagant lifestyle, to save face with the church council, and Jamal was constantly in debt from gambling and made me bear the burden. I only acted recklessly because of family pressure. I love you, I love Malik, please don't do this. Don't destroy everything we've built." I looked down at my husband, disgust rising to my throat. The man who once boasted of being the head of the family, who once threatened to take away my custody of our children, is now kneeling and blaming everything on the mother he once adored and the younger brother he once protected, all just to beg for a selfish way out for himself. I didn't say a word, opened my handbag, pulled out the last stack of documents, and threw them straight at his slimy face. "This is the divorce papers I've already signed," I said, my voice cold, cutting through the space like cracking ice. "And you have no right to negotiate here. Attached to that document is something that will completely end your illusion of ever touching Malik again. Marcus trembled as he picked up the papers from the floor. But right beneath the divorce papers was an official document with the red seal of the FBI. His eyes widened in horror as he read the bolded words on the paper. It was an emergency asset freezing order and a criminal prosecution order. You think I just quietly set up an LLC to buy this house, Marcus? I smirked, my icy gaze fixed on him. As a forensic accountant, I completed the audit and handed over all the evidence of your embezzlement of public funds from the financial corporation to the FBI 2 weeks ago. All your personal accounts, investment funds, and the dirty money you secretly transferred have been completely frozen. You're officially penniless, and federal agents are on their way here to take you away. Marcus's jaw dropped, the paper in his hand, falling into the champagne puddle on the floor. His whole body trembled before collapsing, curled up on the ground, like a defeated man with no life left. His last line of defense had crumbled. He had lost everything: money, honor, family, love, and soon his freedom. Marcus officially collapsed right in the mansion where he had once trampled on me, a cruel but entirely fitting end for someone who had betrayed his wife and children. The frenetic energy in the room suddenly flatlined. The spinning, chaotic world ground to an absolute halt, leaving behind only the cold, heavy weight of reality. The high society tea party had completely dissolved into a humiliating crime scene. The catering staff silently packed up their expensive silver trays, avoiding eye contact with anyone, while the remaining church council members had long since fled the scandal. Under the stern supervision of Sergeant Miller, Beatrice was forced to trudge up her grand sweeping staircase one final time. She was given exactly 20 minutes to gather whatever basic necessities she could carry. There were no designer suitcases or matching luggage sets for her grand departure. She came back downstairs dragging a pair of cheap black plastic garbage bags filled with a few changes of clothes. Her perfectly styled hair was a ruined, tangled mess, and her shoulders were permanently hunched under the crushing weight of her newfound poverty. She walked past the marble fireplace she used to brag about, her eyes glued firmly to the floor, too ashamed to even look in my direction. Marcus remained essentially catatonic. 2 federal agents had arrived shortly after the local police, taking custody of him right there in the foyer. They read him his rights in a low, monotone voice, securing his wrists in heavy steel cuffs. He did not fight. He did not argue. He just stared blankly ahead, a hollow shell of the arrogant man who had tried to force me to my knees just an hour prior. He was escorted out into the sweltering Georgia night, stripped of his tailored suits, his stolen wealth, and his dignity. My father, Winston, stood quietly by the grand mahogany doors, adjusting his suit jacket. He held my sleeping son Malik securely against his chest, protecting him from the toxic wreckage we were leaving behind. I took one last look around the massive living room. The crystal chandeliers still sparkled and the imported rugs remained, but it was no longer a house of horrors. It was just a building, and it belonged entirely to me. I walked out the front doors and breathed in the warm night air. It tasted like absolute freedom. My dad handed me the sleek black key fob to my white Tesla. I slid into the driver's seat, listening to the quiet hum of the electric engine coming to life. We pulled out of the cobblestone driveway, leaving the flashing red and blue police lights in our rearview mirror, completely abandoning the traitors to the ashes of their own making. Imagine the camera slowly panning across a bright sunlit room, coming to rest on me. I am sitting comfortably on my emerald green velvet sofa, a warm cup of chamomile tea resting in my hands. I take a slow, peaceful sip, letting the quiet serenity of my new life wash over me. The frantic, suffocating energy of my past is completely gone, replaced by absolute, unshakable tranquility. The dust has finally settled on the ruins of my former marriage, and the aftermath played out exactly as the evidence dictated. Marcus did not stand a single chance against the federal government. The forensic accounting file I handed over to the FBI was completely bulletproof, mapping out every single stolen dollar, offshore transfer, and forged signature. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of corporate embezzlement and wire fraud just to avoid a maximum sentence. He is currently serving 7 years in a federal penitentiary. The arrogant, boastful man who once threatened to take my child away is now just another inmate in a matching jumpsuit stripped of his tailored suits and his fragile ego. His brother Jamal faced an equally devastating reality. He was quickly extradited back to Florida to answer for his massive identity theft ring. He was handed a 10-year sentence in a state facility. The very second the judge banged the gavel, Chloe filed for a rapid divorce. She tried desperately to claim spousal support and secure a payout, but since Jamal was legally bankrupt and heading to a prison cell, she walked away with absolutely nothing. Furthermore, her precious designer wardrobe and luxury handbags were seized by authorities as goods purchased with stolen funds. Stripped of her fake wealth and her insufferable superiority complex, Chloe was forced to move back into her parents' cramped basement in total disgrace. But Beatrice suffered the most poetic justice of them all. Her precious high society church council permanently excommunicated her. The women she had spent decades trying to impress completely erased her from their social circles, treating her like a ghost. Without Marcus to steal for her, and without my holding company to provide a sprawling mansion, she was violently forced into a harsh new reality. Beatrice now lives in a tiny rundown apartment complex on the far outskirts of the city. The woman who used to sneer at people for wearing the wrong designer labels now survives entirely on government assistance. There are no more catered tea parties, no more imported orchids, and no more crystal chandeliers. She is utterly alone, stripped of her false matriarchal power, and forced to live the exact miserable life she always feared. Imagine the camera angle shifting slightly, tilting upward to capture a brilliant, blinding wash of golden morning sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The shadows are completely gone. The heavy, suffocating atmosphere of that fake brick mansion has been entirely replaced by the crisp, airy freedom of my new downtown Atlanta penthouse. I did not keep that cursed house. The very second the eviction was finalized and the property was cleared, I listed it on the real estate market. In a fitting twist of fate, it sold for significantly over the asking price to a wonderful, hard-working young couple who immediately began remodeling it completely, scrubbing away any lingering trace of Beatrice's toxic legacy. But I did not keep that money for myself. I already had my own wealth, my own career, and my own peace. Instead, I took every single dollar of profit from that monumental sale and turned it into a weapon for good. I combined my expertise as a senior forensic accountant with my father's extensive background in law to establish the Cypress Haven Foundation. It is a fully funded, comprehensive legal aid and financial recovery program designed specifically to support women of color who are trapped in financially abusive relationships. Every day, I use my professional skills to track down hidden bank accounts, expose fraudulent credit lines, and untangle the financial webs that manipulative partners use to keep women trapped. We provide elite legal representation, housing assistance, and credit repair services. I help mothers find their financial footing so they can walk out of their own personal nightmares with their heads held high, just like I did. Transforming my darkest experience into a beacon of absolute hope for other women has been the most fulfilling work of my entire life. The camera pans slowly across my beautiful new living room, catching the rich aroma of freshly brewed espresso. My dad, Winston, is sitting comfortably across from me at our custom oak dining table. He is not wearing his intimidating dark courtroom suits today. He is dressed in a relaxed light linen shirt, his deep laughter echoing through the open space at a joke I just told. The heavy, lethal armor he wore on that sweltering summer highway is completely gone. He is simply a happy, proud father enjoying a peaceful Sunday morning with his daughter. Just a few feet away, bathed in a warm pool of natural sunlight, is Malik. My beautiful son is sitting safely on a plush, thick playmat, babbling joyfully as he knocks down a tower of brightly colored wooden blocks. He looks up at me with wide, bright eyes, his face breaking into a massive, unburdened smile. Looking at my son, my heart swells with a fierce, unbreakable pride. I broke the generational curse. Malik will never have to tiptoe around a narcissistic grandmother. He will never be taught to shrink his own brilliant light to make small, arrogant people feel taller. He will grow up in a home defined by authentic, unconditional love, absolute respect, and rock-solid security. The nightmare is a million miles behind us, and our future is nothing but open, radiant sky. For a long time, I bought into the dangerous lie that being a good wife and a dutiful daughter-in-law meant swallowing my pride to keep the peace. Society constantly demands that women sacrifice our own mental health to maintain the fragile illusion of a happy family unit. We are relentlessly told to turn the other cheek to take the high road and to meet cruelty with unwavering grace. But the brutal truth I finally learned on that scorching asphalt is that the high road is often just a convenient place where toxic people can run you over completely without consequence. Think back to that woman limping on the side of the highway with a baby strapped to her chest. She felt small, isolated, and utterly overwhelmed by the crushing weight of a family that demanded her constant, absolute submission. They pushed me to the edge because they desperately wanted to see me break. But they completely forgot that pressure does not just break things, it creates diamonds. Every tear I shed that day, and every drop of blood I left on the pavement was simply the price of admission for my total liberation. When I finally decided to strike back, I did not use blind anger. Anger burns out quickly, and anger makes you reckless. Instead, I used cold, hard, absolute strategy. I dismantled their fake empire piece by piece, using their own insatiable greed and arrogance against them. Some people from the outside looking in later whispered that I was too ruthless, that I should have handled the financial betrayal privately to spare Marcus and Beatrice the public humiliation. But privacy is exactly the weapon abusers rely on to keep you trapped in their web. Dragging their sins out of the shadows and violently into the light was the only way to ensure they could never rebuild their trap around me or my son ever again. Imagine the camera slowly pulling back now, widening the view to take in this entire beautiful space. The panoramic windows displaying the glowing Atlanta skyline, the warm lighting, and the absolute profound quiet of a home completely free of toxic manipulation. I sit here resting comfortably against the emerald velvet of this sofa, feeling like a woman who has reclaimed her rightful throne. I did not just survive the fire they tried to throw me in. I collected their ashes and built an entirely new kingdom. I look directly into the lens, making eye contact with every single one of you watching this right now. Family is not an excuse for people to trample on you. Forgiveness is not meant for those who see you as a tool. You do not owe a single ounce of your loyalty to anyone who demands your misery as their payment. A sharp, unapologetic smile crosses my face, the smile of a woman who knows her exact, undeniable worth. What about you? Have you ever had to resort to ruthlessness to protect your child and your self-worth? Have you ever had to burn down a toxic family dynamic to save yourself? Tell me your story in the comments below.